How's it going, my fellow snail sufferers? It's your missile guy, and it's been a little while since my last obscure missile series video, so I decided let's add more to that list. There won't be any particular secret type I will be covering this time. I'll just be discussing various missiles that are unknown and all that good jazz. As usual for this series, and any folks who may be new here, I'll be discussing missiles that aren't talked about much, that have real potential for War Thunder. Missiles I consider obscure are ones I don't see discussed much, that maybe never left the drawing board, or that are simply not added to the game. I'm a strong advocate for variety within War Thunder. Missiles like these are always interesting to consider for like event vehicles and stuff. Anyways, as always, everything will be timestamped below. Let's get on with the video. First up into this video, we have the Aim-97 Seekbat. This missile was produced by General Dynamics in 1972. The US Air Force initiated a program to develop a high-altitude, long-range air-to-air missile, specifically to counter the legendary MiG-25 Foxbat, hence the name Seekbat. This is also where the first ever passive radar homing seeker I've discussed on the channel, excluding the R-27 EP and more to come, starts. Anyways, this missile was originally based on the Aim-78 Standard Arm missile and was designated the Aim-97A Seekbat. The Seekbat used a larger propulsion unit than the Aim-78 and supplemented the latter's radar seeker with an infrared homing device. However, the missile had to be locked onto the target before launch. The Aim-97 was intended to be effective at altitudes up to 24,000 meters or 80,000 feet. Test firings of the Aim-97 prototypes against drones began in late 1972, but the program was short-lived and was no longer active by early 1976. This missile is primarily planned for use on the F-15 Eagle for long-range threats and on the F-4 Phantom II, which was used for the initial test firings of the missile and planned to be a general stopgap carrier. The unique thing about this missile was how its guidance worked. It relied fully on a passive homing seeker followed up by an IR seeker used during terminal guidance to ensure interception. The Seekbat was capable of speeds up to Mach 3, propelled by an Aerojet Mark 27 dual-thrust solid rocket. This makes it one of the very first extreme long-range dual-pulse air-to-air missiles ever created, which is interesting to think about. Sadly, the Aim-97 Seekbat was officially cancelled in 1976. The reasons were that alternative weapons already fulfilled our interception roles, the high cost of the missile, and better intelligence proving the MiG-25 combat capabilities were lower than initially feared. It was also said to have a multitude of technical problems revolving around its seeker. On screen, I'll show general specifications. There are slight variations as these are pulled from several different sources combined into one. This next missile is here to prove that I do not hate Sparrows, I just don't talk about them much, but since they are requested, I'll do what I must and discuss them. We have the Aim-7R Sparrow, which is very similar to the ship launch variant known as the Aim-7C Sparrow. The total history of the Sparrow missile dates back to 1947 when the US Navy contracted Sperry to develop a beam-riding guided system for the standard 12.7cm HVAR rocket. The Aim-7R was the final Sparrow variant. This Aim-7 was projected in the early 1990s as an improved Aim-7P Block II, which we have in game. It boasted a new dual-mode radar/IR seeker developed under the Missile Homing Improvement Program, or MHIP, with the goal of improving the terminal phase performance of the Sparrow. That said, the Aim-7R retained all capabilities of the Aim-7P Block II that we currently know and love in game, meaning it kept a semi-active radar for the 7P but added an IR seeker for the terminal phase of its flight. This seeker had the rough characteristics of an AIM-9M but miniaturized to about 1/3 the size to fit inside the Sparrow's radome. This means the 7R almost certainly incorporated some form of IRCCM, since that was a standard feature for American IR seekers by the early 90s. However, the 7R would ultimately be cancelled due to high costs in December of 1996, after the evaluation phase was completed. Fun fact, the seeker didn't go to waste. It would later be used on the RIM-66M 5 SM-2 Block 3 missile. It's worth noting that Raytheon is still producing Aim-7s by upgrading existing Sparrows to the 7P standard. However, the Aim-7 has been replaced in the US by the much superior AIM-120 AMRAAM, and the replacement for the Aim-7M and P Sea Sparrow is the evolved Sea Sparrow missile, unofficially referred to as the Aim-162. Either way, I think this missile will be a great addition. Not only would it make the Sparrow perform better overall, but imagine having a 9M seeker type Aim-7. It would be incredible. Just imagine the type of shenanigans you could get away with using something like that in War Thunder. Alright, the first star of the video is here. Have you guys ever heard of the Have-2? And no, I'm not talking about DoorDash, as you can see on my script here, my initial pre-production script. The Have-2, developed by Loral, was a project that started in the early 1990s. The US Air Force studied advanced air-to-air missile tech under the Have- program, and in 1990, the Aeronautical Division of Ford Aerospace, later acquired by Loral, was awarded a contract to build flight test missiles to evaluate technologies for a stealthy, long-range air-to-air missile under the Have-2 program. To ensure a low radar cross-section, which was the primary goal of this missile, the Have-2 design featured a radar-absorbing coating over a composite fuselage with a flat surface, trapezoidal cross-section across the whole body except the radome. Stability and control were provided by 4 tail fins. The shape allowed the missile to be carried externally, flush against a carrier aircraft, further minimizing its contribution to overall RCS. The shape of the -2 missile provided additional body lift, and this, combined with the fin configuration and a new bank-to-turn autopilot, permitted maneuvering up to 50 Gs, compared to the typical 35 Gs found on more conventional missiles. The missile was planned to use inertial navigation alongside dual-mode active radar and IR guidance. This missile was planned to accommodate some form of air-breathing engine, such as an internal rocket or a ramjet. However, it's worth noting the -2 test vehicles were reportedly flown with a solid-fuel Mark 58 rocket derived from surplus Aim-7F and 7M Sparrow missiles. Yet again, the -2 program was terminated after the test vehicle flights, with no specific time frame given, but it's expected to have happened around 1992 to 1993. No information about the level of success is available. On screen, I'll list the specifications of the missile. These varies from source to source, so expect slight variations, and don't take it as concrete evidence of the performance of the missile. The last thing worth mentioning, this missile was initially intended for use on the YF-22 and YF-23 prototypes, which is interesting to think about and really opens the door for future 5th-gen event aircrafts paired with a unique missile down the line. But who knows, this is Gaijin we're talking about. For our final missile today, we have the Aim-9R, a more obscure variant of the Aim-9 series proposed as a testing stopgap between the Aim-9M and the Aim-9X. The Aim-9R came after the Aim-9M and featured one crucial change, the Seeker. The Aim-9R used the same airframe and booster as the 9M, but with a new IIR Seeker. The 9R kept the same flight model and characteristics as the 9M, however, thanks to its IR Seeker, it had the ability to form a 2D image of the target rather than just tracking a simple heat point, which would greatly increase its overall tracking reliability and countermeasure defense. The 9R had its first live firing in 1990, but was cancelled due to funding cuts rather than any technical failure of the missile. This missile paved the way for the Aim-9X with lessons learned from its Seeker carried over and incorporated into the 9X we know and love. As for my thoughts, considering we've been using the Aim-9M-4 in War Thunder since its release with no upgraded model added after all this time, I feel like the 9R would be a cool way to introduce a not so broken IIR missile to War Thunder for air-to-air combat. Even though it was cancelled, it would add some variety and could serve as a good testing ground for IIR while we wait for the next generation of Fox 2s to be added to our aircrafts, which I've said it before, we aren't ready for, but people are going to beg for it anyways. For my final thoughts, either way, as I mentioned in my disclaimer, I always push for and encourage the most balance possible while still allowing variety. While every missile here was mostly cancelled, they all were fired at least once, and therefore, technically speaking under Gaijin's rules, can be added. The more important concern would be how they'd be balanced. Finally, in terms of variety, I think every aircraft should be able to use every missile it was capable of using, even if it didn't make sense for the meta or whatever. This would allow players to get creative with their loadouts and would also help a lot with custom battles, cinematics, or just creativity in general. There really isn't a reason not to do something like this, and as for adding prototype missiles, it could be a good way to bring more event jets into the game, further increasing variety and helping with the lack of in-game content for long-term players. Anyways, that's all I have for you guys today, my fellow snail sufferers. If you enjoyed it, consider hitting that like button or even hyping my video. It helps push it out. If you wish to help further, consider subbing. It's a great free way to support my channel further as we slowly climb to 4K subs. Also, consider joining the Discord. You can suggest missiles, videos, or just be a part of the group. This was your missile guy. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.